Lou and John Sheehan met through Virgil Thomson and Buffy Johnson, two tough old artists hell-bent on outliving all their adversaries and having the last word. Virgil set a really bad example for which Lou and John felt antipathy, and it sparked their affinity. John's production of Four Saints in 3 acts on the occasion of Virgil's 90th birthday provided the opportunity for a collaboration that cemented their friendship, a friendship that was already aglow and simpatico. John enjoyed the privilege of spending an hour with Lou every Saturday morning for the last 5 years of his life. And I would say that John also is responsible for the organization of this entire memorial, and we owe him a great debt of thanks.
They say that one of the great pleasures of old age is playing with your grandchildren. One of the pleasures of my old age is hearing my grandson play Chopin, for which I'll always be grateful to Danielle. Lou is the one who suggested it. I didn't think Danielle would bother with preschoolers, but they both insisted I was welcome to bring him around on Saturday mornings. Timothy started taking lessons at the time when at first grade. And like so many young people who are here today, he ended up growing up in their apartment. I feel like I too grew up in Lou and Danielle's apartment. When we met, Lou was working for Virgil Thomson, who represented an impregnably aristocratic society of artists and celebrities. Lou presided over the typewriter and the telephone and appeared equally impressive to my eyes. He was tall, dark, and handsome, and although he wore the plaid shirt of the clone era, he looked more like a pizza parlor lumberjack. We quickly found a friendship, nevertheless, based on as much as on our middle-class distrust of elitism as on our own resourcefulness at being canny enough to drink at any party where we could talk our way into the crowd. And I soon found myself learning a whole lot about everything from this friendly, funny guy. Lou taught me that something could be true simply because you believed it was and said it was. The distinguished poet or the groundbreaking painter were just some of the guys we met at Virgil's, but he made an outer reality plausible for those of us who were struggling with identity, be it artistic, political, spiritual, or sexual. I suddenly felt I had stature because he said I did. Lou was one of those people who made you better because you knew that he believed in you. He believed you were better. I had just started an opera company, I guess because nobody told me that I couldn't, and when Virgil begged off from attending, Lou and Danielle were the only two happy to bring along Maurice Grosser, the distinguished painter, and Virgil's lifelong companion. I didn't know anything in those days. I'd heard of Paris in the 20s, but I didn't know what the fuss was all about, that Gertrude Stein lady who didn't seem to make any sense to me at all. When I asked Maurice, what was she supposed to be so good at, he said, publicity. But it was Lou who explained to me what that meant. And when I got around to producing and directing Four Saints in 3 acts for Virgil's 90th birthday, the old buzzard graciously said to me, "Make sure you do it as a nigger show, and you're not getting any money from me." I nearly bit through my teacup, and it was only the sight of Lou in the next room falling over his desk with laughter that saved me from fleeing this madman's digs from the Chelsea Hotel. Lou patiently explained to me over rice and beans around the corner on 8th Avenue that he had all the phone numbers and addresses of Virgil's rich friends around the world, and that if I wrote a snappy letter about my brilliant vision for the coming production, they'd be only too happy to send in their checks. Like two schoolboys playing tricks on the old professor, we launched a very successful campaign that funded the production. The lovely thing about this is that Lou wasn't just helping me. He was also ensuring a triumph for Virgil in his fast approaching dotage. He understood where his loyalties lay. Maurice had also been a part of the creative team, and Lou wanted the show to be a hit for him, in spite of Virgil's stinginess. Maurice was not only an extraordinary painter, as most of you know from the treasured legacy that was entrusted to Lou, but he was also, like Lou, a gentle, kind, and wise man, the absolute antithesis to Virgil. He knew all the time, he knew all the same famous people, but unlike Virgil, he had a heart and he saw life with a kinder eye. I soon discovered that Virgil's world was as much about Maurice Grosser and Lou Rispoli as it was about Ned Rorem and John Houseman, and I couldn't have had a better guide. Lou had the old codger's number and knew just how to bark him down when the rest of us watched in awe. And although Virgil was a nasty piece of work, he loved to cook. Whatever he couldn't make, Lou invariably could, so they got along more famously in the kitchen than they did in the office. Lou also appropriated Virgil's signature sign-off, "Ever best." In the meantime, our friendship had not only taken root, it was flourishing. I thought Lou was terribly avant-garde, not only because he knew all about underground poets, painters, writers, and composers, but because he was also a gay activist, marching in parades, going to meetings, passing out flyers, and pioneering in the search for a significant sense of sexual identity in what was still something of an alternate universe. Virgil enjoyed the licentiousness of the privileged class, but was nevertheless a coward in social circumstances where he felt it not only prudent but necessary to escort a female to the White House when he was awarded the Kennedy Center honors. Maurice, on the other hand, invited to come along as an artistic associate, stopped in at the Salvation Army to see if they might have an old tux that would fit him. When he took it around to the local tailor near his house on 14th Street to get his pants altered, the man asked him casually, "Are you going to a wedding?" "No," replied Maurice, "I've been invited to the White House." The honest tailor burst out laughing and congratulated Maurice on his sense of humor. "That's a good one." Lou used to say that Maurice gave him the gift of letting him get rid of books. We were all educated that books are precious and should be saved forever. Nonsense. And Maurice, who was more of a visual guy anyway, told him, once you've read them, pass them on to someone else who hasn't. Lou liked being guilt-free over not having all that clutter. When AIDS descended on us like a mushroom cloud and we never knew who would be next to die, Lou had the strength and the courage to spit in its eye. When I think of Lou Rispoli, I think of a man who brought homemade soup to his dying friends in the hospital. Richard Horn, Paul Saint-Fasson, and our beloved Maurice were all people he patiently tended to and courageously sat with, unafraid to keep watch over their suffering. When I think of Lou, I think of caregiving, and I think of it as the flip side to his activism. He was an immensely compassionate man. When he himself lay dying in the hospital, everybody at the Elmhurst reception desk knew who he was. They figured he had to be a celebrity. So many people were coming to see him. So many people cared about him. After the first day, when I would arrive and say, "Rispoli," the counterperson didn't even check the list or look for passes. "Go on up," they waved. All of us were there. Friends stuffed his room, overflowed into the hallways, filled the waiting areas, and in our sorrow, we hugged and held and comforted one another. This was his legacy too. Unreserved, unconditional love for everyone. When my boyfriend died, he helped me to bury him. He got his cousin Anthony Scarlatti to take the body. When my daughter arrived in the States, he sent me $100 and a note. "Good for you." He helped me slay a dragon once. A woman I was working for was absolutely impossible. And when I described the situation, he said, "Look, here's what you tell her." He knew about people, about family, about transitions, and passages, and personality disorders. He and Danielle had both come from troubled families, so he understood the need to be courageous for the people you love. Not heroic, simply strong and kind. It was how he lived. Over the years, he'd call up and say, "Oh, it's time for us to get together and catch up. I don't mind coming to Brooklyn." Or if I came to Queens for a great night of cooking, he and Danielle would send me home in a cab. He was proud of his garden, and every year took the trouble to show me the new plants that Danielle and he had installed. When he was working at Merrill Lynch, DLJ, Credit Suisse, he'd tell me about the kids who he worked for, who owned 200 pairs of pants because they were too lazy to take their clothes to the laundry. He'd fly to London to set up those huge business conferences for men who couldn't figure out how to organize a conference room. When I moved to Ireland, we'd chat about the astonishing differences in English-speaking cultures. He loved to tell stories about how dowdy the British were. We talked about everything, shared everything, and passed our years together in an aligned sensibility and a keen sense of humor. Nothing was too ribald or off limits. We discussed those things that a gentleman never mentions and howled with laughter at the vagaries and anomalies of human nature. Lou always appreciated the unexpected, the irreverent, and the absurd. In the varieties of his several employments, he managed to wear many different hats, juggling different duties, specialties, and skills, and always managed to keep the balls in the air at once. Lou, in fact, had balls. He was skilled at keeping his balance in the whole range of difficult and challenging jobs, and he did them well. We have an expression in the theater, don't tell me, show me. So I brought along a training aid. Lou wouldn't want you to be sitting here bored while I talk about all his wonderful qualities. He'd rather have you laugh and get to see something that you can't just get to see at any old memorial. Kyle Peterson lives out in my neck of the woods, Brooklyn, though he does come into Manhattan every now and then. He was actually on Letterman's show a few weeks ago. Lou was a fan of Letterman's, wasn't he? Yeah. I can't ride a unicycle. I don't know if any of you can, but I'm not going to be upstaged by a circus act. I'll just let him entertain you. You think that's easy? Nora and I were sitting around the kitchen table saying, what can we do to make this different? One of the things I'll miss most about Lou was his very good advice. He was one of the few people I would show my writing to because I knew he knew about writing, and I trusted his taste, judgment, and awareness completely. I once wrote a review of a truly dreadful play, and after I read it over, I thought it sounded churlish, perhaps too severe, so I sent it to him for his opinion. Here's what he wrote back. John, I love the fulminating pan, and yours read like the aching howl of a man pushed way beyond limit. Good for you. Enough is enough. Some people are going to see it as indelicate, but fuck them, unless it's your editor. And some people like me are going to love it for its blunt brutality and cleverness and, despite the four-letter words, good writing. You got to call shit shit when it's shit. Especially when it poses as art. Let me know how it gets received. Ever best. I can hear him now. You know me. When he had his heart attack, he told me it felt like he was hit by a 2-ton 16-wheeler. But he was full of praise for the ambulance driver. I told the 911 operator that I was on the corner of 2nd Avenue and 56th Street, and damn, they were there in 2 minutes, and they got me to the hospital just in time. Lou appreciated excellence in any form. He had a problem last year and had to wear an eye patch for a couple of weeks, you may remember, when the cataract anesthesiologist's needle malfunctioned and bruised his eyeball, and he wrote to all of us, "Dear friends, it's been a roller coaster ride, but I have decided to not pursue a malpractice lawsuit over the premature ejaculating injector. I'm going to use all my energy to get well. I have been in touch daily with my GP, Robert the Magnificent, who helped me clear through the fog of doubt. I just panicked and woe is me moment, a big baby wah 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 session. Thanks for indulging me, and thanks to those of you who reminded me to keep my energy focused on the goal of wellness. I promise I will send you a photo of me with the eye patch once I have photoshopped it for the de-aging treatment. Ever best. So like Timothy, I'm grateful for the time I spent growing up in Lou and Danielle's. In the past 5 years, I'd often arrive on Saturday mornings to an empty, quiet kitchen. After about 10 minutes, Lou would roll out of bed, stalk down the hall in his underpants, shake out his unruly mop of hair, and peer at me through squinting eyes. "You want coffee?" he'd say in New Yorkese, scratching his balls, and we'd start the day bitching about the fucking Republicans like two old altacockers on their regular park bench. I'd launch into a tirade, and invariably he'd laugh at something, and I'd say and pick it up, and he'd spin it out, and I'd try to top him. He'd match me line for line, and in 10 minutes we'd be laughing ourselves silly. Danielle would shout from the living room to keep it down, and Timothy would say, "Grandpa, I heard you say a bad word," and it was a great way to start the day. I take the 7 train to Maspeth every Friday night, and astonishingly, I had never run into Lou or Danielle, even during the rush hour. But strangely, on that Friday in October, I was waiting at Times Square for the express to Woodside, and I happened to notice both Lou and Danielle waiting on the platform with a lithe, red-haired lady called Brita. I was in a foul mood, and I didn't want to take the local anyway. I thought maybe I'd walk to the other end and avoid them altogether. But I love Lou, and I could not ever have enough time with him. So I went over and I said hello, and the 4 of us rode the local out to 52nd Street. Danielle and Brita were chatting, so Lou and I caught up. He was happy to finally have a job that made sense, and Greenwich House appealed to him for many reasons, not the least of which was the fact that Danielle was there. He liked to talk about the victory of their marriage. In the afternoon sunlight, as I rode along Queens Boulevard, I noticed that his skin looked really healthy. His hair had a shine to it, and he seemed happy again after years of worry over health and work issues. He and Danielle had had a wonderful summer holiday in Germany, Holland, and Italy, and things in his life seemed to be looking up. I felt better already, even cheerful, when they got up and at their stop. As he exited the car, I looked at his thick, wavy, healthy hair, and I thought, he's in a good place now.
It's hard to do a commercial after that, but I do want to thank Kyle Peterson, everybody. He's the Brooklyn Juggler. There he is. His website is brooklynjuggler.com. We apparently put in a call to the Spanish Harlem Juggler, but he was still busy with the Overflow Cinco de Mayo booking, so he couldn't come. Bada boom.